Hi, and welcome to The Gist. While we're all busy living, we often do everything we can to avoid thinking about death. It's easy to believe that illness and loss is something that happens to other people until we're confronted with it directly. That's exactly what happened to Dr. B.J. Miller when, as a carefree 19-year-old student at Princeton, he had a freak accident that would alter his whole life. Miller, out one night with his college buddies, climbed on top of a parked commuter train while crossing some train tracks. He was electrocuted with 11,000 volts that resulted in several months in a burn unit, coming very close to his own death and eventually losing both legs and his left arm. After a long recovery and a lot of soul searching, Miller began accepting his body and had to dig deep inside to reimagine his future. Remarkably, he says that the accident, as horrific as it was at the time, forced him to wake up from the comfortable and privileged life he had led and face a more brutal reality that allowed him to connect to others' suffering. He eventually found his way into medicine and felt a natural affinity with patients in palliative care. His own experience with near death, loss, and suffering makes him uniquely credible and relatable to those who are ill and dying. And he spent a great deal of time thinking and talking about how we can both live better and die better. In his TED Talk on what matters at the end of life, he describes his vision for how to better manage the process of dying. And in his book, A Beginner's Guide to the End, co-authored with Shoshana Berger, he offers sage advice on how to prepare for death, emotionally, physically, and practically, since there are a surprising number of things to wrap up at the end of one's life. Miller says palliative care is often misunderstood. It's not only about helping people close to death. It's about offering comfort from prolonged suffering, which for some patients can take place over a matter of years, not months or days. He points out that our hospitals are currently places designed to treat disease, trauma, and acute health situations. They do this exceedingly well, as he can attest to both as a physician and as a patient himself. But he also sees an opportunity to bring more humanity and humility to medicine, particularly as we age, and an opportunity to approach death with less fear or revulsion, but instead honor it as the natural and shared destination for each of our lives. In the Zen hospice where he works as a palliative care doctor, the surroundings feel more like a home than a sterile hospital environment, and patients can openly talk about their fears and desires. They can brainstorm with Miller about things they want to do before they die, whether they're big things like rafting through the rapids of the Colorado River or quieter comforts like having their pet stay with them at the hospice until their death. He also helps them stay connected with their bodies throughout their illness because all too often, patients feel repulsed by their bodies during illness, a feeling Miller knows all too well with his own injuries. And he encourages them to continue engaging their senses to find beauty in the simple things, the flowers at the hospice garden, or the sensual pleasure of baking, smelling, and eating cookies in the hospice kitchen. The senses can be especially important for certain patients, like those with dementia, for example, because they can experience their senses in the present moment, even if they've started to lose their grip on the past and the future. Miller says it was by re-engaging his senses after his own accident that he found beauty in living again and saw that there was a whole life still waiting for him outside of his windowless hospital room. He also talks about small but important rituals the hospice has developed after a patient passes, like having family, hospice staff, and even hearse drivers surround the body to share memories or reflect silently while sprinkling flower petals on the patient's body. Simple acts that honor both the patient's life and their death. As for what matters most to patients nearing death, Miller says that there are some commonalities. Most want to remain as independent as possible, retain their dignity, be surrounded by loved ones, and not be a burden to others. Many are afraid of suffering and want to be as comfortable and pain-free as possible, even if they're not afraid of death itself. Others want to fight their illnesses with all medical measures possible to the very end. Yet others want medication and treatment, but not to the point where they're too numb to feel anything or unable to engage in a certain quality of life. Miller sees his job as supporting his patients through such choices and offering creative solutions that attend to individual needs, circumstances, and preferences. As he likes to say, let death be what takes us, not a lack of imagination. Miller has also had many vicarious deathbed moments, if you will, where he witnesses a range of emotions amongst his patients and those close to them, like love, forgiveness, peace, grief, and regret. While he thinks that a regret-free life is impossible and unrealistic, he does encourage all of us to practice self-inquiry while we're living on a daily basis, to stay attuned to our values and live as intentionally as possible, to find beauty and richness where we can, even in the seemingly mundane or difficult parts of our existence, and to realize that despite our modern illusion of control, productivity, or perfect health, real life remains unpredictable, as he can so clearly attest to that night so many years ago at college. We need to approach our bodies with more kindness, become more tolerant of our imperfections, and embrace loss or death as a meaningful, albeit mysterious, part of life. On that note, wishing you a great week ahead, be well, and see you next time on The Gist.